This is probably one of the more common types of interview questions. The question you would get is, I have a problem where I need to manage 1,000 people, or I need to manage a process. So that's one way that people will say it. The other way people will say that design a dashboard for. So these are the most common phrases that people will use. But ultimately, a dashboard, the goal of a dashboard is to manage a process, a system, or people or individuals or elements within that system. At the end of the day, anytime somebody says design something that manages, it's a dashboard. So here's the problem. Design a dashboard for a call center. Very simple statement. How would you approach it? What is your first thought? And again, this could be given while you're doing a whiteboarding session at work. You've been invited on site, or this could also be given as an offline task. If you're doing a whiteboarding session, the expectation from the interviewer is to understand your thought process and how you're approaching the problem. Whereas if you've been given a task, they're also trying to understand, in addition to your thought process, they're also trying to understand how you would execute. So this is what is the motivation from the interviewer's perspective.
So why does a call center need a dashboard like it is to track incoming inbound calls and outbound, and also maybe the how many calls are defect and how long the duration is,
Wait. Don't
so
get
that they
into
can
the
reduce.
mechanics of it. Don't get into the mechanics of exactly what is being measured. Just think, I like your question. Your thought process is, why do you need a dashboard for a call center?
Yes, that's my question.
So let's think about it. Why do you need? So what are you managing? What are you managing in a call center? What are the assets or the processes or the events that somebody is managing in a call center? Go
Maybe
ahead, Arjun.
customer query.
Okay, so that's an interesting one, customer query. But again, go by priority. Think about what happens most of the time versus least. What are the resources in a call center, Kevin? Think about that. It could be technology, it could be processes, people, whatever.
Sir, I wanted to understand who is viewing this dashboard.
I don't care. So this is all the statement that is being given is this. So as a recruiter, as an interviewer, I'm not going to give you any more data until and unless you come back with a thought process to me. So the first step is what Kevin did, is what he's trying to do is he's trying to inventory what are you trying to manage, because a dashboard at its fundamental nature is it is managing something. So the question is, what are we trying to manage?
I guess being a call center, we want to see how many queues are pending,
Okay,
queries.
wait times. So wait time could be a management thing. So okay, cool. But let's
Right.
think about other things that you can manage. Go ahead, Ajay.
Solving the problems for the customers who are facing an issue,
But how would you manage that?
like providing the things like based on the each particular issue, there will be a certain amount of solution to be followed.
So you're basically trying to see how well the process has been followed. Is that what you're trying to see?
Kind of that, and calls received and how the call and identifying the problem of the
Okay, so
customer.
let's break that down. So you've identified three things that they're managing. Okay, the first thing that you're managing is whether people are following the process or not. The second thing that you're managing is how many calls you're receiving. So the number of calls that you're getting is also a metric for you. You have to manage those calls.
Based on the,
Resolving the issue. So satisfaction at the end of it. That's also something that goes to Kevin's thing, which is a KPI. Satisfaction is a KPI.
As per my understanding, moreover, we work with the inbound and outbound calls and how many calls did we attend, and as well while answering the call, the details or the information which we want to get from the user.
There's a couple of things. One is volumes. You're tracking volumes, but you're not just tracking volumes. You're also tracking volumes per person. Every individual is getting a volume of calls or making a volume of calls. So you're tracking those performance. So performance is a huge KPI. There's another thing that you've also mentioned on a tangential note, which was how many types of problems come in. Because you might get 100 calls of one type, another type, and third type. If you look at all of them equally, you're not going to be profitable. Whereas if you say, okay, 20% of my calls are account reset calls, so I know I can create a plan for it. If I get like 40% of my calls are just forgot password calls, okay, then I know that I need to plan for it. So it is the classification. So you want to get understand volumes of calls in terms of classification of problems.
Sir, can we ask at this point that what are a few goals immediately, the business goals that they would like to achieve with this dashboard?
Again, you don't want to ask until you know. So when you're interviewing, it is very interesting. It's a very thin line between asking too many questions versus asking too little questions. You could get rejected for both reasons.
Right.
So if somebody jumps into the problem and solves the wrong problem and comes back and has solved it, well, you didn't ask the question. You have solved the wrong problem. The other side is if you ask too many questions, I'm going to be thinking about it like, dude, just to manage all your questions, to get even one bit of work out of you is going to be a lot of hard work. So I would not probably engage with you there. So it is, you have to be very careful about what question you ask and how you ask. That is why it is very important to inventory what you know and what you understand before you ask your first question. Now, the next thing that you need to know whenever you're managing with dashboards is levels of people who are managing it. You would have basic 3 levels of people. One is the guy who's managing the team. The other guy is the guy who's managing the teams. And the third guy is the guy who's managing the business. So in any organization, you will literally have only at a very simplistic level, you'll have 3 levels of breakdowns. So there is a 4-step process for answering this type of question. The first step in that is who is the user? You're trying to determine the user. Now, when you say dashboard, you're looking at more of the people who are the managers. When you say a certain workflow, it will be the people who are doing it on the ground. The second thing is what decisions is the manager trying to make? Second, what data is required to make those decisions? And finally, you need to prioritize which users and what decisions, because you cannot design the dashboard for everybody. You need to decide which user I'm designing for, which decisions I'm designing for, then you have a very clean and crisp dashboard. And notice, none of these questions require a second question to be put to the interviewer. What you're going to do is, literally, if I was interviewing, I would say, listen, the way my approach to answering this question, especially if you're doing a whiteboard, is who is the user, what decision. So when I think about the user, I'm thinking there are 3 levels of users: people who manage people who manage processes, people who manage businesses. Then you're going to list out the decision. So this is what it is. So the line manager is the guy who manages people. The group manager is the person who manages the process. The organization leader is the person who manages the business. Let's see what decisions they're trying to make. This is where a nice grid will work. This is the simplest grid. You're listing out all your people on one side and you're saying, well, what are the decisions, what data, what actions, what features? Okay. Features is what you would design. And this is going to be your breakout group. So make sure you understand this concept very, very well. What I'm going to do is, for line manager, I populated one and I've done a very small job of it, but I'm basically going to say the decisions that they need to do is, they need to give immediate feedback to team members. Somebody is taking too much time for a certain kind of problem, or something is pending for too long, or whatever it is, they're looking at individual level decisions. That's what they need to worry about. So in order for that immediate feedback, what do you need? You need the call metrics, the time, volume, duration, resolution. So these are the data points that you need to collect for all your calls. The third one is action. Well, what action do I need to do? Well, you're monitoring the performance using the call metrics and you're having conversations with your team members. And the last one is, well, what do you do? So therefore, you're going to give individual performance metrics. For every person, you're going to say, okay, for employee number 5, this is his performance metric. Employee number 6, this is their performance metric. That's what you're going to give. That is the feature that you have thought that you're going to design for this individual. And there'll be many more features that you will do if you thought through it. But what I'm doing is I'm simply giving an example of how you would look at it. So now I'm going to give you the challenge. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to break you guys. Let's see how many people are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13 people. And Simran is the 14th guys. And one person, remember, always when you're running these calls, one person is the moderator. They're looking at the time and say 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay. So which of you 3 is going to be the moderator? Raise your hand. Just close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. You open your eyes. You can't open your eyes. Understand why I asked you to close your eyes is, what is interesting is when you keep your eyes open, you're always looking around you to see who is going to volunteer, not me. When you close your eyes, you know there's nobody else. You either step up or you don't step up. That is the only choice you have. And understand, when you're working in a company, leadership is about stepping up. And when you step up, when nobody wants to do it, people notice you. And moderation is one of those skills. Nobody thinks of doing it, but when you do it, you become a leader within that organization. And I promise you that you do that for 20 days in your company, people will automatically start asking you for advice. Okay, while Gagan is figuring it out, Achyut, you want to share your screen?
So we had a timer, sir, and we wanted to be clear with this thing, the 4 steps, who is the user, amongst which one has already been done here. So we kind of tried to stick with these being the users, or leader, group manager, line manager, and call center agent. Ran out of time for call center agent. But here, depending on what data and decisions we had, this is the group manager we figured out is our priority, sir, in terms of
Why?
because a group manager is having a lot of line managers under them, and line managers are anyway in conversation with the call center agents. So a group manager would want to understand progress of the line managers because they are anyway taking track of the line agents. Here, if we thought what Ajay was said is if we are able to manage the group managers, then the impact will be much higher.
While I agree with your decision, I'm not agreeing with your rationale. You need to have a stronger reasoning, or at least a stronger communication about your reasoning. So from now, from where I'm looking at it, they're looking at the progress. So they need to look at the number of calls attended by each team, time, volume, resolutions. But again, keep in mind that the group manager challenge here is they're managing a process. When you're managing the process, you want to understand, well, how much escalations is happening? Where are the calls going? Remember, when you're managing people, you're managing the metrics of that person. When you're managing the process, maybe you're managing the performance of teams. So you would probably want to see that. Or you would want to see the performance of a process where, like, how many escalations, how much time are we spending per call, or how many different types of problems are we getting, and how are each of those, what is the effectiveness for each of those types of problems. Those are the kinds of metrics that you'd want to see there. Then when you look at the org leader, you're looking at the business. So you're saying, well, is our productivity high enough? Do I need to hire more people? Do I need to basically make my team smaller? Maybe I just redesign the website instead of hiring more people. So those are the kinds of decisions that the organizational leader is looking at. But this is good. So again, what I say is the first time you're doing it, it feels very rushed. It feels like a challenge. But every time you practice, you get really good at it. And I was saying, like, for somebody like me, this exercise might take me about 15 minutes. For somebody like you, for the first time you're doing it, it might take you like a week. What I'm introducing you to is a way of thought process. It is your practice is something that you need to do on your own. Okay, Gagan, you're next. Thank you, Achyut.
So what we did was so exactly what you said. So for the line managers, what we looked at is, like, for example, the team performance. What the number of teams that the team members that they have, and how they're performing. So the operational metric there was that what is the so if it's an inbound, we were looking at call handle time, and then there is a metric, like, for example, if you have a certain time, and that there is a KPI of that particular agent, if they're able to meet that within that KPI, that means they're doing a good job. So there's going to be difference of, let's say, for example, you have 10 people, out of which you might have 5 people who will be performing well, and there'll be 5 people who might not be performing well. Now this gets rolled up to the manager. So that is, let's call it a line manager. So the manager then is
process manager. Let's say process manager.
Process manager. So the process manager, their job is to ensure how to pull up teams where the performance have not been good. And then the org leader, his job is, so he is basically looking at the service level agreement on which the business is given to the call center. So how they are looking at this entire thing is that in case if the entire business is meeting the service level agreements which the contract is signed, then they shall do the business with them. So the discussion is the business level. Therefore, the data points for the dashboard should be for the process for the org guy should be business driven. On the manager level should be the operational level on how teams are performing, and
So what features have you come up with?
So we wrote team performance or team leader manager level. So basically is the individual performance for the frontline manager. The group manager, there is team performances, and the org is basically how they're, maybe if they're distributed across different geographies, how each of these processes are doing across their geography, or if it's a client base, how the clients under which like a org guy will have various clients maybe. So then how he's managing each of the client and what SLA is he performing.
I like that. So for an organizational level, you're looking at organizational SLAs. So you will have every client, and for every client, what is the SLAs being met or not, red, green, and yellow.
And then it's also broken down into quality perspective, because you can have operation at the cost of quality. So you will have quality aspect and the performance aspect, and everything is getting rolled up. So
got it.
So let's say, for example, if there are teams which are doing good performance at the top, the company is performing very well. If the performance at the bottom is not doing very well, therefore the performance on the top is not very well. So this metric needs to be evaluated. So the KPIs get summed up to a SLA.
Right. Cool. Awesome. So the way we basically approached it is something very similar. So this is how we basically approached it. And we said, okay, let's look at which group is there. What is, the person who's managing the process, the features that we were looking at is customer feedback at an aggregate level. For individual teams, you're looking at open versus closed calls for individual teams, complaint logs, case efficiencies, team performance, team comparison. These are all the features that we thought about. The same way when we are looking at organizations, we are looking at trend analysis in terms of like, okay, what are the guardrails? So maybe we say, okay, for each call, if the market trend is you spend about 40 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever, then are we better or worse than the market? It could also be not just the market, it could also be the benchmarks that you set for your organization. So it could be benchmark control. Then there is the goal setting where you can set up your goals for each of the individual teams and how well they're achieving it. Then you are looking at the feedback aggregation at the whole, at different process levels as well as at different team levels. Then you're looking at performance versus pay. So you're also looking at what is the cost return on investment for individual problems or individual opportunities. So this is where you're looking at. But when you start looking at this, more or less, most of the problems that an organizational leader has is very similar to the outcomes. When you drive it, it is very similar to a group level, okay, which is the process managers. So what we felt was if we design for a process manager, you would be able to solve a lot of the problems of the organizational leader as well, with a couple of additions, which is the benchmarking component. But my thought was that even a process manager should have the same benchmarks so that the process manager is following and tracking the same. So that is why our thought process was that as a group manager is the guy that for whom we need to create the interface. And again, the other reason is organizational leader, there's probably only one organizational leader, but there may be 20 group managers reporting to that organizational leader. And so the volume of people who will benefit from that interface is much higher at a group level than at an organizational level. So therefore, we also felt that that was another reason why we need to focus on the group manager. Now, why should we not focus on the line manager? One of the reasons why we felt we should focus on the line manager was because they're getting the data anyways on a very regular basis. Even if you provide the dashboard, the amount of incremental value a line manager will get is probably a lot less than what a group manager will get. And so my decision was that I'm going to design the dashboard for a group manager. And so we said, okay, so then my ideal user is a group manager. So we're going to focus on the operations. And then the features are we're going to look at customers' feedback, open versus closed, complaint logs, team performance, the team comparison and all that stuff. Those were the features that we basically thought through. Here's one of the screens that we did where we said, okay, you're going to look at the customer feedback, and then A and C are different teams. So there's the feedback for different teams, the success rate for different teams. I'm also looking at complaints. I'm also looking at the average feedback score. The first thing I look at is the average feedback score. And again, these are things that we have prioritized and we've just sketched it. Now, ideally, what you would do is you would basically, at this point, if you had the opportunity to ask questions, you would say, well, my analysis of this, I would say, is the group manager is probably this. I would go with the group manager. Would you agree with my assessment? And is that the way for me, or is there any other data that I'm missing? You never ask them, should I do something else? You say, is there any data that I'm missing here? So that way, if the person feels you're wrong or you're not going in the correct direction, they will give you additional data to make up your mind. Versus if you ask the person question, am I doing it right? Then you're losing credibility because this guy can't make a decision. That's what the other person is thinking. So just repeat after me is ask, am I missing some data? That is the question that you need to ask. Never ask, am I correct? So now that you've asked and then you clarify it at that point, then you come up with 5, 6, 7, 8 sketches. And you say, okay, which sketch is doing what? Which one is better for what? So in this case, I put one screen, but you would have a bunch of screens that you would sketch and you'd say, well, yeah, this one is really good because you can track the feedback, but it's really hard because there are, it might be that, I'm looking at what is call frequency. I'm looking at call frequency. So I cannot make a decision on that or whatever, or there are too many charts or whatever. So that's why it's not actionable or there are not enough actions in here. So if somebody wants to say, okay, send a message to this team, I can't do that. So every sketch you have a positive pros and cons, and you say, now based on all these pros and cons, here's my final solution, and you share it with the team. So what that is doing for the interviewer is they're saying, okay, you understood who the user is, you understood what their problems are, and then you asked me for clarification. Am I missing some data? And then once I got the clarification, then you said, okay, I can see that this person is is making a decision, and then this person has put 4 or 5 ideas, and they've thought through those ideas and they've recommended one idea that is the best. What you might also do is you might take that one idea and design it in Figma or whatever, and then do it a little bit more higher fidelity. But you also show these sketches and you say this is the final thing. When you see the process, the other person knows that you thought through it in a very, very systematic manner. Same 4-step method, but when you do this, at the end of the day, you've earned their respect. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
So Prasad, while we were ideating, right? If I had to, I mean, assuming that this is at an interview, in front of the interviewer, if I go ahead and take the entire thing and send it to GPT and get the data instantly, because what we were doing was ideating and trying to fill in those gaps. But if we had given this to GPT, it would have chat GPT, it would have given the answers in about a couple of seconds. And then if we start with that, would that approach be looked at as like, I don't know how that approach will be looked at.
Good question. If it was me, I would have loved it.
Yeah, because after finishing it only, I realized that this could have been done really quick.
No. You actually recommended it while you guys were ideating. I don't know why Vishnu didn't do it.
No, I'm talking about like feeding this table to ChatGPT and saying fill in the following information with 3 points per block and give me the table with this being the
So
headings that
what
we
I
fill.
would have appreciated is you would have created that prompt. You
Yeah.
would have created the prompt for the 3 users. The line manager is this manager is this is the description for each of the managers. And then you would say, now you will say, give me all the decisions that they're trying to make. So you would, if it was going live and I was watching this, the way you wrote your prompts would have been really valuable. And then you just copied it and pasted it. You would have edited it and say, okay, now I've edited it. And then here's my final solution. Here are my sketches. So what I would have seen is how you were leveraging ChatGPT and AI to get your work done. It would have been total off the work that you've been doing, because nobody would have done that for me.
Yeah.
And I also know right now, every company right now is under pressure to say, okay, how can AI replace people? It's a simple question. I mean, there's a lot of politically correctness, like, AI is not replacing people and all that stuff. But really, the people who are doing the mechanical work, who are not doing the critical thinking, are replaced. The people who are doing the critical thinking. So by doing this process, you're showing me that you have the critical thought, you are able to automate a lot of the work, but at the same time, you know what work you can do and you know what work the AI can do. Okay, go ahead, Jasmine.
So now this topic was about the call center, but what happens when there's a topic subject which really gets little complex? For example, ESG. Now something we don't even have any knowledge of, for example. Now this differs from company to company. We really don't know what are the targets that the company is wanting to achieve. So if I ask ChatGPT, again my question was regarding ChatGPT for a subject which I really don't have any knowledge of. So if I segregate my thoughts in this goal and your targets and metrics, will I get the right answers? This is somehow
Let's do that thought exercise. I love your question. Let's do that thought exercise. So the formula I gave was, I said, okay, ESG is environmental and social goals.
Yeah.
So the problem there is that you are basically saying I need to recruit people from different groups. So it goes to people, process, environment, all 3.
Yeah.
Right? So people is, are you hiring the correct people? Do you have the right mix of people? Are you, giving support to those individuals? That is one way. Okay. The other way is, are you giving trainings within the community? Are you giving the appropriate support? So you're giving the support within the organization. Are you supporting outside of the organization, right? Which is the social component. And then the governance. Well, what is the quality? What are the outcomes of all of these things? So that is what, when you look at the ESG, it is structured. And also, what is the cost to the environment? That's the other part, is for all your activities, what is the cost and what is the outcome that you're driving? Now, we said there are 3 types of managers: people managers, process managers, and business managers. So would ESG help people managers? What can people managers be held accountable for ESG? Well, actually, to a certain extent, because you can say, well, what is your hiring, your type of hiring? You can identify that. You can hold people accountable. Or the other part that the people can do is also like, what kind of support are you giving for social programs? So like volunteer hours or whatever within your team or whatever, you might have X number of social hours. So that's what the people managers can do. The process managers can say, well, okay, so you have an outcome that you want to achieve. Is a certain process achieving that outcome or not? So you can say hiring, recruiting. I'm managing the recruiting process. So, well, what is the outcome of my recruiting process? Am I hiring correctly? Well, if I'm a community support guy or I'm an education, learning and development kind of a person, well, how much outreach have I done? How many people have I supported? How many people have grown? What kind of roles? So that is also another kind of metric that you can have. Now, when you're looking at the business guy is basically looking at the end of the day, is it helping my business? I mean, if you're going bankrupt and you're doing ESG goals, good luck. You're not going to be doing it for more than a year. So maybe the question is ESG aligned with my business? Where is it not aligned? Where is it aligned? How do I align it better? That is a thought process that you're looking at the group business manager level. And again, I've never thought about this. You never talked to me about this, but we are just solving it in real time.
Yes.
So now that I've identified the metrics, and again, the same table, I've said, okay, this is what this guy is trying to do. Now let's see what kind of features can come in. Your features would be fairly simple once you do this. And then you say, well, is this the right thing or am I missing some data here? Now, when you ask that question, you're basically trying to see, oh, in my organization, this is what happens. In my organization, this is what happens. Good. So let me customize it for your organization. I got it. I understand it. Same formula will work for that problem too.
Perfect.
The trick is practice. One of the reasons why I do these workshops a lot is we get blank mind. Oh, we don't have time. My mind is blanking out. I can't think. No, you have to get past that blankness. The more you do it, the more you become comfortable with not having answers, the better you get at it.
So, sir, very in line with what Simran has asked. What if I did it like this, sir? There are 4 steps that we have seen in the presentation, right, sir? So, in each step, I immediately first identified what are some very repetitive, mundane tasks which doesn't require my involvement of analysis. If I separate and quickly while demoing my screen to the interviewer, if I just put that to ChatGPT and ask, okay, ChatGPT, tell me for this role, what are the KPIs that can be impacted? What would this strategy be looked at for the interviewer?
I think it'd be great. If you're saying modify this, edit this, standardize this. One of the other things that I would actually say is I like your idea. This is what is the difference between you and me. When I say you is not you specifically, but everybody in this call versus me. Because the years of experience I have, I've probably put my finger in something at some point in my life. It's just experience. I've got more experience than you have, and therefore I have a list in the back of my mind of all the possible stuff. At least I know the most common stuff. But at the same time, I also have a significant disadvantage and you have a significant advantage. My disadvantage here is that I am not able to think of new stuff because I've seen so many things. At some point, if you tell me that won't work because I've seen it not work before. So I may give up on an idea that may work because the environment is changing also, right? When I tried it at that time, the environment, the market, whatever was there at that time, it failed because of that reason. But because of my experience, I may not be as willing to try out new stuff, but you are willing. So you are willing to take the risk and you're willing to see it. So that is the disadvantage and the advantage of experience. When you look at dashboards, and again, people get surprised when I see this. There are only 6 or 7 types of screens you will ever design in your whole life. Nothing more than that. Dashboard is one of them. So if you take these 7 experiences and you apply this formula every time, you don't need to do anything else. And if you work with ChatGPT and say, okay, for a call center, how will it look like? Practice it. For something else, how will it look like? And get the most common solutions. You're reading it, you're familiar with it, you're good.